started. Today we're going to talk about personality typing and why it matters in relationship to our own individual spiritual, emotional health and our understanding of others. First, who am I? My name is Julianne Farnsworth. Among other things, I'm an author and a musician, but most relevant to this video is that I'm a research psychologist specializing in personality profiling. Many people have heard of the Myers-Briggs, the disc platinum, or even the colors. Those are examples of personality typing systems, and they're very useful in academics and business, etc. In fact, my first exposure to personality typing was in college when I was doing my undergrad in healthcare administration, which is a business administration type thing. These typing systems are very useful, but they have severe limitations. If I were working in human resources at a company, a personality profile would be extremely useful to me. It would tell me many things about how the employee would interact with people, what things would frustrate them, what things they would excel at. It would tell me many things about the kind of job that the person would be most suited to, but it would not tell me much about their motivations. Ever wonder, you see another person and they do this crazy thing and like, why in the world would they do that? It just can't even wrap your mind around the possibility of there being a reason. And it's that type of thing that the Enneagram actually addresses, not only in others, but in ourselves. And that's the most interesting aspect of it and why it can be so powerful. It's quite simple to take a personality assessment, and if you've done so, you may have found the results interesting. You probably answered a few questions, and cool, it spit out detailed information about you. But it's unlikely you learned much about yourself that you didn't already know, and that makes its usefulness on a personal level minimal at best. There is a lesser-known personality system called the Enneagram. The word Enneagram comes from the Greek root for the number 9, and of course gram, describing a graph. The Enneagram has been around for a long time, so you may wonder why, if you haven't heard of it, why that is. Well, the reason is that most colleges and academics argue that it isn't quantifiable, and it's hard to measure the validity by testing. That's true to a point, and there's a simple reason for that. But in order to understand the answer, we need to discuss a little bit of the background. But before I go on about that, I want to add that the Enneagram is taught at Harvard University. So it is a very valuable system in psychology, and I would argue the most valuable of any of the typing systems. More importantly, unlike other personality systems, the Enneagram tells you what you don't know about yourself. The origins for most personality systems are predominantly the same. Most spring from the work of the 19th century psychologist by the name of Carl Jung. The Enneagram has separate and earlier roots. In spite of the separate origins, the Enneagram is very close to Carl Jung's early writings. He only had 8 types, while the Enneagram has 9, but his theory of personality originally had a lot of spiritual elements. It's important to note here that spiritual is not used in this context as it would be in religious vernacular. I could use the term spiritual to describe the part of a person or selfhood that is different from a computer. It could also be referred to as the soul in a non-religious manner. It's that very spiritual element that makes the Enneagram most useful, but also makes it difficult to quantify. But it's the very things that make the Enneagram so much more powerful in the uses that we would be talking about in emotional, spiritual health and motivations. When the typing systems other than the Enneagram were created, the spiritual elements originally in Jung's work or others was basically stripped away to make it easy to quantify, but it dramatically diminished the usefulness. Using the most common typing systems, a person may change types throughout their lives, but that is not the case with the Enneagram. The reason for this is that other typing systems don't describe a complete individual, whereas the Enneagram does. Myers-Briggs, for example, takes Jung's original 8 personality types and adds more detail by splitting each one of those into 2. So we end up with 16 different possibilities. Well, the Enneagram is relatively simple to understand by the 9 basic types and other elements, including wings, social variants, and levels of health that will be discussed in another video. That gives us a 9 times 9 times 3 times 9 possibility of personality states. In other words, 729 possible personality states or emotional places a person can be in kind of a social emotional snapshot. So once you find out a person's type and their sub-variable types, they don't change throughout their lives. What they do change in is their emotional, spiritual health. And that's why a person can be very different when you meet them. Like 10 years later, you think that person wasn't like that at all. That's because of that emotional, spiritual health level changing, whether for good or bad. I'd also like to mention that I prefer to use the name perspective types rather than personality types. I believe that's more accurate. Some people don't like personality typing systems because they think it puts them in a box, but described as perspective types, it doesn't cause as much of a knee-jerk reaction in those people. You could think of it more as like-minded people. Imagine for a minute there are 9 people in a room looking at a white wall. Each of them is a different Enneagram type. If we pretend that all the types are wearing invisible colored glasses, I say invisible because the people themselves are unaware that they're wearing them. Each has a different color of glasses looking at the same white wall. One person would say it's purple, one would say it's red, and so on. So who's right? No one. See, the wall is white, but everybody sees the color that's reflective of the colored glasses they're wearing or the perspective type. So no one has completely accurately described what they've witnessed. But what they have witnessed, being different than the others, is also accurate for them. The difference in perspective types not only explains why people see things so differently, but also emphasizes the need for understanding of the types for the spiritual understanding of ourselves and others. In the next video, we'll explore in more detail how the system works. So that's all for now. See you next time.